Hello and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Monday, June 2nd, 2025, the 153rd day of the year, the first of 5 Mondays in the month of June. Welcome to the new month and National Rotisserie Chicken Day, created by the Boston market restaurant chain, which barely even has a chain anymore. According to Google, there are 28 locations still operating out of the more than 1,000 that they had at one point. I actually always kind of liked Boston Market. Hope you had a terrific and safe weekend doing the things you love to do on the weekends. Yesterday marked the start of the Atlantic hurricane season, so tens of millions of Americans in the Southeast and along the Gulf states will hopefully begin preparing. And in Colorado, the FBI calling the incident at a Boulder rally in support of the hostages still being held by Hamas a targeted terror attack. This is the FBI special agent in charge of the Denver field office.
Witnesses are reporting that the subject used a makeshift flamethrower and threw an incendiary device into the crowd. The suspect was heard to yell, "Free Palestine," during the attack.
At least 8 people were injured in yesterday's incident. 45-year-old Mohammed Sabri Salman was taken into custody. Overseas, Russia and Ukraine exchanged drone attacks over the weekend, with Ukraine targeting Russian military bases, destroying dozens of Russian aircraft ahead of a meeting between the representatives of both countries in Turkey today. Newsmax correspondent John Huddy, who has covered the war in Ukraine since the beginning more than 3 years ago, spoke with former Undersecretary of Defense Robert Wilkie on Sunday Agenda. The conversation picks up after Huddy talked about OPEC Plus increasing the world's oil supply.
I want to get your thoughts about OPEC. I don't know if you heard the reader at the top.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that seems, it seems to be very good for the Trump administration and a good sign. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. But look, I'm talking to the expert here, and thank you for having me on about Russia. If oil, which is now, Ural's oil is now sitting at about $45 a barrel. If that drops to $40 a barrel on the world market, and with the Saudi move, it certainly will, Putin has more arrows taken out of his quiver. He cannot sustain a war economy when oil is that low. We've always had it in within our means to do that by Trump unleashing American energy on the global market. But with the Saudis doing this, it shows that Putin has done more than overplay his hand in Ukraine. He's overplayed his hand in the Middle East. He's been chased out of Syria. And now, because of his support for the Iranian regime, I think the Saudis are finally saying enough of this, and they have the means to further increase Vladimir Putin's predicament.
Seems to me that was more than likely a topic of discussion on the sidelines, out of the public and media view during the president's most recent trip to the Middle East. Talking about the ongoing war, as I mentioned, both sides are expected to meet again face-to-face tomorrow in Istanbul. I was in Istanbul during the last face-to-face, the first time both sides met in 3 years, a couple weeks ago. Look, that's good news. I mean, it's going in the right direction. There are very low expectations in that first meeting, as I mentioned. What was it, like 2-3 weeks ago at Istanbul? We weren't expecting an end to the war. But both sides, what came out of that, as you know, both sides agreed to release 1,000 POWs each. And at this point, I think they've released about 850. They're on track to do that 1,000. But really, I don't think we're going to see an end to this until there is a summit between Putin and Trump. And that was the hope, and the hope the last time around. I don't think we're going to see that this time, but really to get it done, there has to be that, right?
Well, Zelensky has absolutely no reason to concede to the Russians right now because Ukraine is not losing. Last night, the Ukrainians launched a massive drone attack on 5 major Russian air bases and destroyed 41 long-range bombers and fighters, reminding the Russian people that Putin's special operation is not going well. And also, Putin has only managed to claim in 3 years of this fight just 50 extra square miles of Ukrainian territory at the cost of 900,000 Russian casualties killed and wounded. So he's now in a predicament of his own making. He's flubbed his nose at President Trump when 2 offers of ceasefire have taken place. Look, I think the only way this happens, there are 2 ways. One we talked about, and that's the crippling of the Russian economy. And the second is if the president has had enough of Putin's lying and killing, and the spigots for American weapons open up and get to Zelensky. I think those are the only things that are going to make Putin say enough is enough. But he staked his whole regime on this, reclaiming the Russian Empire. So he has done this to himself, and it's interesting from an intellectual perspective to watch him try to wriggle out of this mess.
Former Undersecretary of Defense and former Secretary of Veteran Affairs Robert Wilkie on Newsmax. The Senate, which is working on the one big, beautiful budget bill, is now expected to start working, if they haven't already, on a Russia sanctions bill. South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham and Democrat Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut both visited Ukraine only days ago.
The American people see Putin as unreasonable. They say Ukraine is trying. President Trump has made that distinction real. So the Senate and the House of Representatives in the next 2 weeks will be moving forward with a sanction bill that's bone-crushing.
If I were President Trump, I'd be insulted and offended by this affront personally, as well as to the United States of America. And America should be angry, deeply angry.
Again, Senators Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is at a NATO meeting in Lithuania.
For us, very important is ceasefire, unconditional, of course, ceasefire and humanitarian issues as to bring back adopted children and of course, exchange of warriors.
According to the current White House calendar, the only scheduled event for President Trump today is lunch with Vice President Vance. But I would imagine that he will be making comments on these weekend events at some point today. This is Newsmax's Tom Basile on America Right Now.
Let's face it, folks, and I hate to say this, but America squandered its opportunity to preserve the victory over the Soviet Union that for a moment led to the expansion of peace and freedom in a unipolar world led by us, led by this nation. A naive approach to communist China and a repeated misjudgment of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin have combined to assault American dominance. Our reticence to fight to win the war on terrorism led to decades of being mired in guerrilla warfare that sapped our attention and resources. The radical shift in policy and priorities of the Democratic Party since President Obama's election in 2009 also pulled our focus from projecting leadership abroad to domestic and social experimentation. Remaking America had the effect of also squandering our chance to build stronger alliances and ensure the Cold War victory of the West wasn't just a mirage. Now the threats that over the last 30 years were often murky have come into specific relief. Now the failures of our domestic policy and the radical nature of the left's social agenda, from abortion on demand to transgenderism and legal drugs to open borders, have been laid bare. In a nation this big and this complicated, when our people are beset by anti-American forces on every side, foreign and domestic, history has shown, sometimes we take a little while to see how fragile our freedom is. And whether we are in a unipolar or bipolar world, how important it is for us to lead as a nation morally, economically, diplomatically, and militarily. Our moment is here. As we begin a year of celebrations of the 250th anniversary of the establishment of this last best hope of Earth, this American moment is unlike anything that we've experienced before. We have leaders in government actually exhibiting some political courage for the first time, perhaps in my lifetime, to right the ship of state, to realign our priorities and walk us back from the abyss of fascism. We have Americans unafraid of the left's cancel culture, hardened by the government and the media's COVID oppression, who have resolved to stand and fight to defend freedom, American values, and common sense. Those people come in many forms. The student who stands up to a school administrator who demands that he removes an American flag from his car. The women athletes who refuse to play against or share locker rooms with men. The Jewish students on campuses who refuse to be intimidated by the anti-Semitic hate tolerated by our higher education complex. The parents who are engaging in their schools to prevent their kids from being shaped by Marxist and divisive ideologies. And the people who have chosen to turn off biased left-wing media who peddle misinformation. Gone are the days when we would say that there is very little that separated the ideologies of the two major political parties in America. The past decade has been one that has shocked our American sensibilities. But there has been a purpose. It has given millions a greater appreciation for the values that made this nation strong and free and a global leader.
But in a few short months since taking office, we have achieved the swift return of American strength at home and abroad, now working with the vast majority of people in this region who seek stability and calm. Our task is to unify against the few agents of chaos and terror that are left and that are holding hostage the dreams of millions and millions of great people.
Our new American moment isn't about personalities, though we are obsessed with them in today's media culture. It's about a set of ideals expressed with an American sensibility. What does that mean? It means leading not with military adventurism, but a resolve to ensure peace through strength, dialogue, free markets, and the promotion of freedoms that are endowed by our Creator. It means leading by example again. It means calling out the horrors and the atrocities of communism, socialism, and authoritarianism. It means providing clarity again when it comes to the objective, scientific, and biblical truths that are the underpinning of the success of this republic.
That is Tom Basile, host of America Right Now, Saturday mornings at 9 Eastern on Newsmax. Tom went on to point out that in this American moment, we even have an American Pope. The one big, beautiful bill was the topic of conversation on all of the Sunday shows. This is Kansas Senator Roger Marshall with Charles Marino on Sunday Report.
Senator, President Trump seems more than willing to make some compromises on the bills as it heads to the Senate. What kind of changes should we expect to see in the Senate version of this bill?
Well, first of all, Charles, I think 90% of what most conservative Republicans want is in this bill. That it's going to be the largest tax cut in history. It's going to be a $1.6 trillion cut in spending by the federal government, the largest decrease in spending in 30 years. But I still look, the background here is the number one problem that we face, this nation faces, is our national debt. So I think we need to cut some more spending. I think that's where the big opportunity is. I think that also we can make some of the business tax cuts permanent as well. Several of them, the R&D development expense, interest expenses as well. We want to make those forever rather than just for 4 years.
Yeah, and along those lines, not every Republican is sold on the bill as it is now. You've got folks like Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, who wants to see deeper cuts in line with DOE's recommendations. Here's what he told Newsmax. Please watch.
We've increased spending from $4.4 trillion to $7 trillion in just the last 6 years. We basically doubled spending in the last 10 or 11 years. 2014, we spent $3.5 trillion. Now we're spending over $7 trillion. So again, it's completely out of control. There's no justification to continue to spend what we spent during an emergency pandemic.
Senator, if the Senate does their share of slicing and dicing, will the rest of the GOP get on board?
I think there's a sweet spot to get there. And I certainly agree with everything that Ron John just said there, that we were spending $4.5 trillion before Biden, and now we're spending over $7 trillion a year. Look, COVID is over with. We don't need all that emergency money. So that's why I'm trying to say, let's get from $1.6 trillion of cuts, which is where the House is. We need to get that to way over $2 trillion and work towards a balanced budget. This is the number one problem that our nation faces right now, is that we're spending $1 trillion a year on interest. interest, when you're spending that much of your budget on interest, there's little left to do the other important things.
And another important part of this bill is the $46 billion to revive construction of the border wall and other barriers, plus $4 billion to hire an additional 3,000 new Border Patrol agents and 5,000 customs officers. Senator, you were at the border recently, a passion of both of us. Is it fair to say this money set aside for boosting border security is all necessary?
You know, it absolutely is. Look, for 4 years, I've been calling for the president to send our military troops to the border to become a force multiplier. They've done that. They've done an incredible job. Border crossings are down in the Tucson sector where I went from over 2,000 a day to less than 50 per day. And I asked the same question to them. I asked the Border Patrol, what do you need for long-term success here? And they said, number one is we need more border fence. To your point earlier, $45 billion of this one big beautiful bill is going to go towards 2,000 miles of some type of a barrier. It's going to increase the border officers by 20%. It's going to increase the number of ICE removal agents by over 100%. So for long-term success, we need to finish building the president's wall, put more soldiers, put more Border Patrol officers down the border as well. This is exactly what we need to secure. This, by the way, is the president's number one promise to America when he ran, was to secure this border. This will give us long-term success.
Yeah, look, I mean, the progress in the last 4 months is indisputable. That layered approach to border security, physical barriers, technology, manpower, this is all going to solidify all the progress that's been made.
Charles Marino with Senator Dr. Roger Marshall of Kansas on Newsmax. There was also a lot of talk over the weekend about President Trump's Pennsylvania rally back on Friday with steel workers. What you likely didn't see or hear much about was President Biden's speech in his home state of Delaware on Friday as well. More on this from Newsmax Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen.
If the prostate cancer that has spread to his bones is taking a toll on former President Biden's physical condition, it wasn't visible this morning at Veterans Memorial Park in Newcastle, Delaware. There, beneath rainy skies at a small and belated Memorial Day event, former Senator Tom Carper, another aged figure of Delaware political royalty, introduced the 46th president. In 11 minutes of remarks, Mr. Biden spoke not at all about the tumultuous events of the last 10 months, nor of his successor. Instead, he urged Americans to, quote, defend democracy and thereby honor the memory of fallen soldiers. But he did so in that halting, coughing, and slurring delivery that marked Mr. Biden's final years in elected office.
Every nation was founded on geography, ethnicity, some unifying principle, but not an idea. The idea of America was founded on, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We meant it. That's who we are. That's what makes America the most unique nation in the world, literally, not figuratively.
The former president also honored his late son, Beau, a former Delaware Attorney General and Iraq War veteran whose death occurred, the elder Mr. Biden noted, 10 years ago today. The release this month of the audio of the president's interview by the special counsel's team disclosed that Mr. Biden couldn't recall on that occasion when Beau died. Today, the emotion was palpable.
Remember, I got a phone call. I was in Washington. Dad, what are you doing Friday? I said, what do you need, honey? He said, I want you to pin my bars on. I said, pin your bars on? You have 2 kids, you know. Dad, somebody's got to do this, Dad. Proudest day of his life was putting that uniform on. That's not a joke. That's not hyperbole. That's real. And you know, it's one of the proudest things I ever did, pinning his bars on him.
In brief remarks to reporters afterwards, the former president disclosed that he is treating his cancer with a medication unspecified that comes in pill form. Also, when asked about yesterday's denunciation of his wife by the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who called the former First Lady a liar, still pushing her lies on the American people, the former president quipped that he didn't know who the press secretary at the White House was these days. Mrs. Biden was not in attendance this morning.
Newsmax Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen, who brings you multiple updates from the nation's capital on multiple shows throughout the day on Newsmax. And let's wrap it up with this. The White House won't be lit up like a rainbow this year, but it is June and it is Pride Month. And this is Rob Finnerty.
The annual month-long celebration for the LGBTQIA2S plus community. It is a community, just like the S community. We don't get a whole month, but the straight community can have Pride too. But do you know what all those letters stand for? Does anyone on earth know what all those letters stand for? And every year, more and more get added, and everyone is expected not only to know what it means, but to have unquestioning respect for every single letter. LGBTQIAS, that's 8 letters, that's 30% of the alphabet. It stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, two-spirit, and the plus sign actually stands for anything else they might have missed. Seriously. And we are the only country in human history that does this, that indulges this whole thing to this level, including like the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks, who had some pretty out there customs, if you know what I mean. And all this only got worse when Joe Biden was president. Suddenly, a massive trans pride flag could be seen hanging outside the White House. Why? Why? Right? Why do something like that? Not only that, but at night, they would light up the White House in the colors of the rainbow, again, to show the world that the White House and the Biden administration has pride. And on Sunday, Pride Month will start again, but this whole thing is very strange. And no one seems to ever want to talk about it or bring it up. It just happens every year. But every June, we are all asked to show our pride and respect while we honor what some people choose to do in the bedroom. We've got parades with floats where we celebrate what people do in their private lives, which is really odd and really strange when you think about it. 340 million people live in the United States, and every year for a month, we're asked to celebrate what people do in their most private moments. I once saw a float. I was asked to be on a float in a parade in Florida when I worked at a station there. And I saw another float with Santa Claus whipping the reindeers, who were men dressed in drag with antlers. This was a parade during the middle of the day with kids and families. And the last time I checked, Santa Claus did not ever whip the reindeers. Okay, they fly, they're magical. Rudolph's got a red nose, but they don't need to be whipped. They know where to go and they know what to do, Santa Claus's reindeer. And we do this for a whole month. There's no Veterans Month. There's no straight month. There's no month where we honor the union between a man and a woman. There's no month where we honor the nuclear family. No, instead, for the next 30 days starting this weekend, it will be scenes like this all across the country. Although not at the White House, not anymore.
Rob Finnerty is the host of Finnerty, 8 p.m. Eastern on Newsmax. Catch it tonight. And if you don't know, because I've seen a lot of this on social media, Military Pride Month is not pride in the military. May was Military Appreciation Month. Military Pride Month recognizes the contributions of the LGBTQIAS plus in the military. So you're supporting Pride Month in the military. And with all the discord between the United States and Canada, the United States has quietly sent more than 150 firefighters and air tankers to the Alberta region of Canada, one of several areas dealing with more than 100 wildfires. Active wildfires combined. More than 15,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. And the NHL Stanley Cup Final is about to feature a U.S.-Canada battle between the defending champion Florida Panthers and the team that they beat last year to win the Cup, the Edmonton Oilers. Game 1 is Wednesday night in Edmonton. In the NBA, Indiana eliminated the New York Knicks over the weekend to win the Eastern Conference. They'll take on the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA Finals beginning Thursday night in Oklahoma City. On Wall Street, stocks started the new month in the red, slightly in the red. Dow down about 100, NASDAQ down about 75. And the new month starts in the red after a record-setting month of May, especially for the S&P 500. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies also in the red this morning. Bitcoin down to 104,000. XRP at the time of this recording was off 2 cents, but over the weekend has fallen all the way back to $2.14. Again, that's on XRP. The Russia-Ukraine talks in Turkey, tariffs, the one big beautiful bill, hurricane season, Pride Month, all the big stories today. And you can keep up with all of it on Newsmax, N2, and at Newsmax.com. It all begins each and every morning with Wake Up America. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you so much for checking out the Newsmax Daily. Enjoy the rest of your Monday and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.